Bettina, as Michael Freytag, Public Health Manager for WEC, I would like to interview today on your recent trip to India for the B20. And I would like to ask you first, what are the main challenges the B20 has been identifying during your recent meetings? What has been the main discussions in India?
Michael, thank you so much for this time and for the interest, and actually, of course, for the support that the World Employment Confederation team has given to this G20 process under the Indian presidency. We've been very heavily involved in the work of the task force on future of work, skills and mobility for the past 10 months. It was an honor for me to be one of the co-chairs of this task force. So of course, we have shaped the discussion of this task force from the beginning. And as you remember, in the beginning, all the topics were on the table. Because it's true, it is a massive time for the labor market right now. There are so many angles that need to be looked at, and so many angles where G20 countries, but all the countries in the world, look to shift and take into consideration those tectonic changes. So within the task force, we decided to focus on 3 angles, and those were the future of work, right? So specifically topics that have to do with inclusion. And it was also around diverse forms of work, around acknowledging that labor markets today need to reflect the fact that as many people as possible can work and therefore have the type of contracts that they need, that is under the diverse form of work agenda. The second element we looked at, well, it has to be skills. Everybody's talking about the need to re-upskill, to include the need for digital skills, for green skills. So the recommendations that were pronounced also touch on skills. And the third aspect that the Indian presidency was very keen about and that we have been working on was around mobility, talent mobility, which particularly for the Indian labor force is of interest because they are busy also producing talent for foreign markets.
And many things you just mentioned just ring a bell to me in our daily work in Brussels. But what are the main interests and the main reasons for our industry, HR services, to be involved, and what is the main outcomes you see for our industry?
Well, Michael, as you know, this platform we've been involved in, the B20, which stands for Business 20, is of course the private sector arm of the entire G20 process. And I could just not imagine a conversation on employment and on the future of work without our industry. We are the private employment services sector. As World Employment Confederation, we represent all the compliant and all the well-regulated companies in an industry which is present all over the world. Now, World Employment Confederation is structurally organized in 50 countries, of course. We represent the biggest companies. So I have the pleasure of speaking when I sit at the table on behalf of 60 million workers. Again, a massive part of the labor market. And we bring a perspective to the table which is unique because we are, as a matter of fact, the only voice that is focusing on flexibility and that is focusing on appropriate regulation on flexibility, on diverse forms of work, making sure that labor markets incorporate flexibility. Of course, there's the elements like adaptability, like security. And for us as the HR services industry, to be able to contribute to that global agenda, bringing in that perspective is of course key, and it's actually a responsibility, I find, as well.
Bettina, I know that you've been involved in many events of the B20 process and G20.
It was hard work, Michael, hard work, but yes, events.
What are your main takeaways? What are your main lessons and the main impact you see for our, as you say, 50 countries around the world for the industry in the challenging times, for talk about the poly crisis? So what are the main takeaways?
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, first of all, it is absolutely fascinating. There was a big learning curve for me to see how the Indian presidency has managed the entire process. The energy, the professionalism, the grandeur of the Indian government and the Indian business community in putting up the entire B20 summit was really impressive. So if you talk about, well, what was a key takeaway for us we have an Indian member as World Employment Confederation. It is the Indian Staffing Federation. And I'm very proud because some of the members of the Indian Staffing Federation have been actively involved, also as supporters of this process. But overall, this has been an important window for our Indian members to showcase the work that they have been driving over the past years. The Indian Staffing Federation is only 10 years old, so this was an important milestone, and they could also underscore their willingness to work with all the partners in India on the various topics. Of course, World Employment Confederation is over 50 years old. And for the other members, well, it's key for us as a global industry to be present in such fora. It is something that is being noted all over the world as well in their respective countries. It is something that our corporate members note as well. And with that, I can only say, already looking forward and gearing up to next year's G20 and B20 process, which will be presided by Brazil. And I already thank the head office for all the support in that context. So thank you, Michael, for this conversation.
Thank you very much, Bettina.
Until very soon.
Indeed.
Take care.